Today, we're diving into something called motivational interviewing. It's this really powerful way of talking to people that can, well, it can actually help them find their own reasons to change.
So let's start with something I bet we've all run into. It's what you could call the persuasion paradox. That moment when you give what you think is perfect advice and it just completely backfires. I mean, have you ever been in this situation? You give someone just perfect advice. It's flawless. But they just ignore you. Or even worse, they do the complete opposite. It's so frustrating, right? Well, it turns out you're not going crazy. There's a real psychological reason this happens. Yeah, this table kind of breaks it down perfectly. The second we say something direct, like, you should do this, it's like a defense mechanism kicks in. Instead of listening, you get pushback, denial. Sometimes they'll even start arguing for the very thing you're trying to help them change. And this isn't just people being difficult. There's actually a name for it: reactance theory. You know, when we feel like someone is trying to take away our freedom to choose, we get this gut reaction to push back and prove we're still in control. It's that "don't tell me what to do" feeling, and it's super powerful. And look, this isn't just about small stuff. This has huge, real-world consequences. Get this, up to half of all patients with chronic conditions don't take their medicine like they're supposed to. And it's not always because they forget. A lot of the time, it's tied to this very same psychology of resistance. It just goes to show why we need a totally different way of talking about this stuff. Okay, so if telling people what to do is a bust, what's the alternative? Well, that brings us to a whole different kind of conversation and the story of how motivational interviewing came to be. So picture this. It's the 1980s. A lot of addiction counseling was really confrontational. You know, that whole tough love idea. But this one psychologist, Bill Miller, he noticed it was just making things worse, making people shut down. So he came up with this pretty radical idea. What if we were more collaborative, less argumentative? And that was it. That was the start of MI. Later, he and another psychologist, Stephen Rolnick, took these ideas and started applying them to all sorts of health issues, like the medication problem we just talked about.
So what is it, really? Well, the official definition calls it a directive, patient-centered counseling style. Now, wait a minute. Directive and patient-centered sound like they contradict each other, right? But that's the genius of it. It's about gently guiding the conversation towards change, but, and this is the key part, by focusing on what the person is thinking and feeling. Especially that feeling of being torn, that ambivalence.
Okay, that's the theory. Sounds good. But how do you actually do it in a real conversation?
Well, let's get into the main tool you can use. A simple little thing called the EPE cycle. It's super easy to remember. Elicit, provide, elicit. That's it. It's this 3-step loop that lets you share information without setting off all those reactance alarm bells we talked about. Seriously, this can completely change how you give advice. Okay, so here's how it works. First E is for elicit. You start by asking, so what do you already know about this? You find out where they're at. Then the P is for provide. You give them the new information, but you do it in a neutral, non-pushy way. And then, this is the most important part. The final E, elicit again. You ask, what do you make of that? See, you're giving the control right back to them. But hold on, before you even start that cycle, there is a golden rule. You always ask for permission first. Something as simple as, hey, is it okay if I tell you a little more about that? That one question changes the entire dynamic. It shows respect and turns them into a partner in the conversation, not just someone you're lecturing. I love this question. It's a perfect example of that last elicit step. So where does that leave you? It's so open. There's no judgment. It just puts the ball in their court and invites them to think for themselves about what the information means to them. It's so simple, but so powerful. All right, so we've seen the how with the EPE cycle. Now let's dig into the why. Why is this method so darn effective? It comes down to some really cool psychology. Okay, one of the big ideas here is something called cognitive dissonance. Basically, as humans, we hate it when our beliefs and our actions don't line up. You know, like believing, I'm a sensible person, but your action is, I smoke? That clash creates this uncomfortable feeling inside. What MI does is it helps people talk through that internal conflict, which in turn makes them want to resolve it by actually changing their behavior. But here's the other piece of the puzzle. It's called self-efficacy. It's not enough to just want to change. You have to believe you can. If someone doesn't believe they have what it takes, they're not even going to try. So a huge part of motivational interviewing is about finding and pointing out a person's strength, building their confidence so they feel like, yeah, you know what? I can actually do this.
All right, let's bring this all together. How can you start using this stuff in your own life, in your day-to-day conversations? It's really about making a few small but really powerful shifts in how you talk with people. Here are 5 big ones. Instead of questions that get a yes or no, ask open-ended ones. Instead of just waiting to make your point, really listen and then reflect back what you're hearing, so it sounds like you're feeling. Every so often, summarize what you've talked about to make sure you're both on the same page. Point out their strengths and good intentions. And here's the big one. Try to draw the reasons for change out of them, instead of just telling them why they should change. And this chart really shows you what that looks like in practice. Look at the difference. Instead of saying, you should, try, you might consider. Instead of I want you to, try something more neutral like, some people have found that. These little tweaks in your language might not seem like much, but they can completely change the vibe of a conversation. You know, when you get right down to it, motivational interviewing isn't just a set of tricks for therapists. It's a whole mindset. It's about communicating with respect and real curiosity. So as we finish up, I'll just leave you with this to think about. Who in your life, maybe a friend, a coworker, a family member, or hey, even yourself, could really use a different kind of conversation?